About a month ago, I asked myself the question, who would I fight for? And who would fight for me? Now, nothing in particular queued this question up. Just a nagging feeling, I suppose, that in some way I needed to address this. Now, I extrapolated this as well to include, I suppose, acts of altruism in exchange for fight, because we live in a westernized society. There's no reason to stand at arms with other men at short order. There's really no need for that in most cases. So what I was really asking was, whose time is available if I need it, and who do I give time to? While I was thinking about this, I kind of cleared up in my own mind what I believe altruism to be. So I think it'd probably help if I mention that briefly. I think that acts of altruism are essentially deferred praise, and the reason I say this is because if I perform an altruistic act and attribute it to a sense of morality, that altruistic act is only valid if they share that same morality. I know it's fairly cold and people don't like thinking about things as zero-sum games very often, but hopefully this particular take on it will make more sense as to why that might be the case, to why it's deferred praise rather than some existential moral compass or whatever. And the problem I identified is that we've got a cult of individuality. We believe that your accomplishments are more meaningful when you achieve them alone. Individuality is king, essentially. Not exactly sure how we arrived at that, but that's certainly the case, right? If you and 6 other people engage in some activity, then you share in that shared accomplishment. But if you do that same activity on your own, you're a god, and that's perhaps more damning of our character and the character that we hold in high esteem. I mean, if you can accomplish an act and bring 5 other people along with you in the process, surely that is more of an accomplishment than just doing it yourself. All that doing it yourself has told the world at large is that you've managed to do this thing on your own and not convince anybody that it was a worthy undertaking. Whereas if you can share in that same accomplishment with other people, then you've also validated your own efforts in the process. But no, individuality is king. We tend to reward most actions with money, and money causes all sorts of arguments and problems. And so I think it was only natural that we developed into this kind of individual approach to solving problems. I also think that the sort of iron of political correctness has played a major role in this. The homogenous mass of humans that we now think of as being our culture and our community is, we're told, equal, completely equal. So how an individual would, how an individual would stand out in that completely equal crowd is to achieve things on their own, to be the single peak on the plane of the homogenous mass of people that make up their community. If you get 6 other people, 5 other people, whatever number, to join you in that endeavour, all you're doing is reducing the impact that you yourself could have achieved on your own. And I think that's possibly why, because we believe that everyone's equal. So exceptions to that position are more notable if you're the only one that's done it. But if there's another 5 people that have done it as well, then essentially you're not as unique as you would otherwise have been. And there doesn't appear to be any other way, any real tangible way for any person to feel unique. Anyway, I'll come back to that later because we have more to say on that. But yeah, I think the answer to this particular problem is tribes. We need to cultivate tribes within our society. And what I mean by tribes is not remote and isolated communities living off the land. I don't mean that. What I mean by tribes is people that are bound together for enduring periods, who look out for each other and who put each other's interests before those of other people, non-tribe members, which is completely against the mandate of political correctness. I realise this. And woe betide anyone that tries to give a job to their friend. And when you do suspect that there's an example of this, you are absolutely up in arms about it, because you've taken an unconscious contract with the world at large to not engage in this behaviour. And anyone that does engage in this behaviour, it's seen as cheating. And we don't like cheats, especially considering that we've already decided not to, right? Breaking the rules. But maybe it's a stupid rule. Anyone ever think of that? So, yeah, what I mean by tribes is groups of people who have, got each other's back through thick and thin. And that's not necessarily manifest in, physically defending each other and fighting together, but giving each other a leg up. Acts of generosity to each other. Just knowing that the safety net that you appreciate from having a flat salary, for instance, would be not available from other people, but you go it alone, right? We're all men are individualists. We go into the world alone and we stay there alone. All this kind of nonsense, I think, is irrelevant. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be in tribes. We should be in small groups. I don't know what the optimum size is, but I've a sort of feeling that, between 5 or 6 and 20 odd would probably be ideal, but that's literally just guessing. That groups like that, they wouldn't be isolated, I don't think. Or they don't necessarily need to be isolated. I mean, I guess in a sense it's up to them, right? How they choose to go. But you'd hope, for instance, that they might integrate into society in the same way that the tribes that we already have do, which is essentially to have, intertribal relationships with other tribes and other organisations, and have sworn codes of ethics which are, upheld by the government at large. We already have tribes, right? Look, okay, here's some examples of some tribes. Right. Sports teams. When you see group of rugby players or American footballers or Aussie rules footballers. They are doing what is probably the closest thing we have to non-firearm physical combat. That's what they've been practicing all this time. They move. The team moves as a single unit. They stand shoulder to shoulder. They have a goal, which is to defeat the other team, and in the process of doing this, are breaking all sorts of boundaries, personal space boundaries that non-sports players ever consider breaking. And anecdotally, I've heard rugby players say things like, "Oh yeah, I can chase people around the bar just by moving, like half a foot closer, and it's outside of my personal space boundary, but it's well within theirs, and so they have to move." Anyway, they're tribal, right? And you would assume that the guys like that would take the opportunity to support each other in any endeavour that they have, if it was allowed, if it was possible, and if it didn't impact on them in a negative way. If it's a win-win situation, why wouldn't guys on the same sports team help them out in other endeavours in their life? Why wouldn't they? Well, obviously they would, right? Another tribe that might not like this, but hey, is Etonians, right? And groups like the Bullingdon Club. Now these are politicians in training. Politicians in training who have been tied close to each other. They've grown up together, right? You can see the frustration of commentators like Russell Brand when he says that you've no choice when it comes to voting, because these guys like Cameron Clegg and that Labour guy that shouldn't have won, they've been working towards a common philosophy since their adolescence, and the choice of voting, if you're in the UK at least, seems to be on the issues that they choose to banter over. That's no choice. It's literally not a choice. They all think roughly the same thing, and are arguing over over bikes and bus lanes. What the hell? Anyway, these guys, of course, never acknowledge it, and I wouldn't like to make any libelous statements, but you would assume that if it was permitted, they would scratch each other's backs. Of course they would. Why wouldn't they? With other tribes in the UK, some very large tribes, military, police force, and it's probably unfair to compare them in the same way as with sports teams and politicians, old boys clubs as they're called. Probably because they're more sort of flexible, I guess, in the way that they can be deployed. But yeah, it could be an infrastructure where a local headquarters is the centre for that geographical area's police tribes. I don't see why this is an invalid sentiment. The police will look out for each other. It's more of these kind of common sense things, right? If you consider you being in an altercation with another member of the public, how much, and the police are called, and they're called to they're called to break it up or whatever. How do you think that's going to go down if that person turns out to be an off-duty policeman or woman or family thereof? It's not going to go as well for you. It's obvious, right? The military, soldiers essentially, working in squads, intensive, very short durations of time, I suppose, in comparison to other things, but they are actually involved in sort of physical life and death conflict situations, or at least they can be, and you're going to look out for your squad mates. You're going to look out for the men in your company. There's going to be, I suppose, delineating effort. The larger the collective that you're able to support. So if it's someone from another regiment, then you'll be sympathetic to them, but you're on the whole going to be facing, you're going to be facing your squad. You're going to be looking to support your squad first. Just the nature of it, right? I mean, you're going to help them if you can. You're definitely going to try and diffuse the situation if it's like internal, but they operate as a whole. These groups of people that we don't call tribes are essentially superorganisms. They're groups of people that are working as one unit, or working as one kind of collective, I suppose. The other one, of course, is gangs. And gangs are, by and large, given negative press. Probably for good reasons. But still, what they have in gangs is loyalty, right? They have each other's backs. There was a thing on recently. It was about the new football hooligans of Britain, and they followed around a few of these people. And the guys were tribal. They enjoyed being in a tribe and doing what being in that particular tribe, which usually involved fighting, right? They enjoyed it. They loved it so much they would give up on equivalent projects. I mean, what would drive people to do that if it wasn't worth it? This isn't really a question of rationalizing and calculating whether it would be a good move to be in a tribe or not. This was just the reaction to the environment that they were put in. They had a choice of go in the tribe or don't. They chose to go in the tribe. They looked at the outside and went, "Nah, I'm going to stay where I am." I mean, they're pressured into leaving, of course, because politicians and police force and the general public take a dim view on violence just kicking off right in front of their faces. But, yeah, well, okay. But the point is that they got something out of it. They got something out of it that they didn't get out of normal life. And so it makes you wonder how many of these other groups of people get something out of it that they don't get out of normal life. There are other things which are bandied around as communities, and I'm not entirely sure why people make the comparison to things that are obviously tribes. So, for instance, I've heard the phrase "the police community." It came from the lips of Tommy Sotomayor, who's a great YouTuber. Check him out if you haven't already. But yeah, the police community. They're not a community, they're a tribe. Right? Community is some really odd, loose word that's used to describe all cyclists or all smokers or all office workers or something like that. And these aren't, I don't think these are tribes personally. I think these don't fit into that model. The act of smoking is not something that you can like reasonably call common ground with someone to the point where they're going to do anything for you except maybe give you a cigarette. And that's probably unlikely, right? Cyclists, their common ground with each other is road safety and road etiquette. Maybe, if they follow the racing, you know, whoever won the Tour de France, or, you know, the prospects of the indoor cycling team in the next Olympics. That's it. They don't scratch each other's backs. Being on a bike doesn't mean anything apart from you're on a bike. Office workers, what's their common ground with each other? Well, they've got to deal with members of the public who work for other companies. They might be the competition. They might be people that bring goods to you or are involved in selling your merchandise, whatever it is. These are not ties that bind. There's no encouragement for people who work in an office to gel in a tribal way. You're there for money. You're there for 2 years, and any longer than that, you're doing something wrong. Yeah, there's no sort of policy of cohesion that really leads to, you know, a tribal society within offices. I think you'd have to go, you know, all the way to the top to sort of the board members level before you even got to anything remotely described as a tribe. And people go through the motions, don't get me wrong. They act out the sort of fetish of being in a tribe. They, you know, make these generous donations to charity, or they help each other out in different ways, doing favours, gaining social capital. But it's not a very good currency in the long run. We're far too individual. So I suppose it might help to explain why I think it would be beneficial, particularly for men, to engage in more tribal behaviour. This has come from a couple of sources, so I'll just briefly describe these. One is a psychologist called Tom Golden, who did a short 25-minute speech at the International Conference for Men's Issues last year. There's a link in the low bar. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but he said that that men heal through action or inaction by honouring and pulling into the future, and they do it shoulder to shoulder. What he was getting at, and I mean, it makes a lot more sense if you watch the video. He has some examples of how this might be so. My favourite one is of two men in a fishing boat who spend the whole day fishing in the middle of a lake and don't say a word to each other, and come away knowing more about each other than they could have done if they'd spoken. Yeah, I don't know. I've never been in the middle of a lake on a fishing boat, but hey. But I think he's right. He points out something quite obvious, which is that you know, the talk therapy industry is fixated on this idea that men and women are, you know, the same, to the point where you can provide psychology in the same way. Like, the model is transferable between the sexes. And he does touch a little bit on what do you call it? Like gender differences, I suppose. You know, I'm trying to say some men are wired like women, vice versa, and there's a bit of mishmash in the middle, but for the most part, we're talking, you know, men are wired a different way. And make some quite obvious observations, like, you know, his training, during his training, he was encouraged to, you know, make eye contact and try and get people talking, and pointed out that for men, making eye contact is a challenge. It is a competitive stance. Yeah, that's right. It just is. If you are a man of drinking age, you will have had that weird situation where you are just in a bar and you catch some guy's eye contact and neither of you break away quick enough, and all of a sudden you're locked into this odd kind of hostile, territorial staring game for no reason other than just pure coincidence and accident. You know, it happens. So, men heal shoulder to shoulder. That's basically what he said. Men heal shoulder to shoulder. But if we aren't in tribes, if we haven't got men at our side, at our back, if every man is an individual, that means that every man is potentially a competitor. And that means that every man is facing you, making eye contact with you, and no men are stood by you shoulder to shoulder with you. In another video I watched recently, which was the Goodfella and Sargon of Akkad show from, I don't know, just the other day, so just look back a bit. Sargon of Akkad was talking about the book Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, or whichever way around it goes, and talking about how he agrees with the sentiment that men want sympathy, not pity, and that they don't want advice unless it's requested, and unsolicited advice denies you agency. And these three things I resonate with. I don't want pity. Sympathy is only good if it's not piteous in the process. And I'm probably guilty of doling out more advice than perhaps I should. So, you know, I'll probably watch this in the future, I think, and try and do that less. But unsolicited advice denies the agency that a man wants to be able to sort out the problem on his own. You know, if a man wants advice with something, it's not a cue for you to then pity him and then bombard him with advice and then further unsolicited advice. The action and inaction that Tom Golden spoke of extends to this. You simply say something along the lines of, dude, that's really bad, and allow them to talk themselves. Inaction involves not engaging in communication. That's why you're staring at the wall. So this all fits in rather neatly with the notion that we should probably be aiming at a more tribal micro-society for culture to pick itself out of the doldrums of this political correctness soup, this horrible, flat, homogenous mass of people that we have. We're coming around slowly, and I noticed that a lot of people, a lot of YouTubers and commentators are saying notions along the lines of, you know, unfairness is just a fact of life and you're never going to stop it. This seems to be the core debate between social justice warriors and the rest of the world, is that, you know, the types of inequality that you want to eradicate are not feasible to do. They're just impractical. They're going to cause more injustice in the process. And people are warming to the idea that maybe we should just toss the whole thing and start reintroducing more freedoms to people in terms of their choices, so that they can just get by, without interference. The other aspect of that, I personally don't like the interference from the government on things that are cultural. I don't think it's its job. Personally, I'm not an egalitarian or whatever it's called, but I do think that there's too much government, and more than we need, essentially. I don't need government to tell me, where I can and can't smoke. I'm quite happy to take requests from people on the street. Yeah, if they don't want me smoking outside a shop or whatever because it makes the shop smell, they can come tell me. I'm okay with moving, right? But let us sort it out ourselves. I don't need a government to tell me to do that. Anyway, rant. Sorry, getting off topic. So I drew out a little table here. I'm not going to be able to reproduce this. I can't be bothered, essentially. But I think part of the reason why men are in such a mess at the moment is because we've ditched this tribe, this sort of tribal model of society, almost entirely, right? Your typical kind of conversation between a man and a woman will involve a lot of errors. She'll want to make eye contact and speak lots and have you emote and feel sorry for you, and you will want to resolve her problems and give her advice. But male to male support is not possible, because there's no one in your tribe, right? Because of the cult of individuality. You're told that it's you against the world, right? It's you against every man. I'm against all of the other 330 or whatever million it is people. Well, I'm against them all, right? The other 30 million men in the UK are my competition. So when I need to heal, I've got a woman who doesn't understand me, or a bloke who's in competition with me, as it stands, right? And because this new understanding of how men work psychologically different to women is only just frothing to the top now, then female psychologists are unarmed for the task in hand. So, a tribe member, someone who is on my side, someone whose side I'm on, we can provide a role. We can stand in a circle facing outwards, shoulder to shoulder, or and it's really something that would pay to discuss, pay to consider when discussing cultural diversity. Because at the moment, we kind of don't have any. Now, in the UK, I have to speak to the UK. I apologise for anyone outside of the UK listening to this, but this is, these are the examples I can give. This is the life I live, right? In the UK, I'm a southerner, and there are northerners. And then there's this weird bit in the middle. Midlander doesn't really roll off the tongue very well. I'm not even sure how people in the Midlands really define themselves. But the geographical differentiation does nothing anyway. If I was in a situation to help either a northerner or a southerner, it would, why would I help a southerner? There's what, like 20, maybe 30 million Southerners and about the same Northerners. Go figure. Well, that's not a tie, right? That's not a group that can be in any way reliable. That's just a slightly smaller, large group of people. So geography doesn't really work. Now, obviously, you can do towns, and you can do small villages, hamlets, or estates, or whatever it is that you have, right? And I think that's what people do. I think this is partly why you have the gang problem. The gang problem being that groups of people aren't working together towards anything positive. They're just grouping together. I think that might be the real issue with gangs. But hey, yeah, there's like geography doesn't say anything really about about me. The town that I live in, it doesn't matter. I can move to a different town and it's going to be largely the same. I'd have to go several hundred miles before it got any different, and even then it wouldn't be very much different. There would probably be a shift in the number of people in different classes, right? Typically speaking, the further north you go in the UK, away from London, the larger the lower classes become in number, right? Or at least the ratio of them to sort of upper class people, middle class people, or whatever. And yeah, this is a cause of sort of warranted resentment I feel towards London, because essentially they're the paymasters of the UK, right? So any notions of people up north being friendly or whatever is it's more a case of they've got this unifying common ground that you're not one of the people, or one of the people allowing the people who've got all the money and power to do stupid stuff, right? And it's kind of an odd thing that people like myself in the South don't take more responsibility for the actions of the people who live locally and what they do to the rest of the country. It's an odd thing. I'm getting off topic, but there are regions where the likes of the Prime Minister and whatever, they live locally. I live within sort of 50, 60 miles within a lot of rich and powerful people, but they're not part of my life. I don't know them, which is which I think is kind of hard to understand for Northerners, that there's this obvious wall between me and the people I know, and them and the people they know. Not the Northerners, the rich and powerful, right? And you'd think that we down south should sort the mess out for the betterment of the country, but we're bleeding powerless as the rest of it, as everyone up north, right? They live behind their little fenced communities and all the rest of it. We don't see them. Anyway, this is getting slightly off topic, but geography doesn't work, I don't think. It's also one of the things I think Tommy Sotomayor has to say about race is that we need to acknowledge our whiteness. White isn't a useful term to describe any allegiance, right? We're white, but we're many, and we're anonymous, and we're individuals. There's no culpability. I mean, how do you pin it down? How do you sort out problems when there's no tribes to sort of talk to about it, right? How is the black community supposed to talk to the white community when the white community doesn't exist? There are no spokesmen. There are no memberships. There are no groups. We're just one big blob. I mean, there's probably traits that whites are guilty of, right? Understatement and reservation and kind of just sort of plodding along, sort of general apathy, and yeah, whatever. The point is that the whiteness is something we need to speak about at some point, definitely, and try and figure out who are the whites, right? Who makes up the whites, and how can each in turn, I don't know, put their flag in the ground. Anyway, so that doesn't really work either, because there's no obvious group, and there's just thousands, hundreds and thousands of people. And lastly, I think I just want to talk about maybe the benefits of thinking in a tribal way, because there clearly are some. And I mentioned earlier the example of the achievement of selling something to another group of people, and then you all doing it together in a cohesive manner. That's more difficult than just doing it on your own. It's one of the benefits. You are, achieving something, and you're also carving out a sense of identity that involves those other people. Because if you do something with other people, then that is your and their shared achievement, right? And it's more valuable. It's more valuable than having just done it on your own. I mean, if you make it back from doing something on your own, you've then got to convince everybody that you did it, for a start. But, actually having a group do something together, making a change, doing a thing, having an achievement, that's way more valuable. It really, really is. I don't like this kind of postmodernist attitude to forming your identity. It drives me spare. I'm supposed to feel unique, right? You probably heard the term snowflake. That's the funniest thing, but it is literally a symptom of that lack of tribalism, right? Nobody has groups to belong to anymore. So instead of being identified as a member of this group, a member of this larger intergroup council, a member of this tribe who happens to like fried eggs, you have to like fried eggs and then pick a load of other useless tat that you can bolt onto your personality in order to make yourself significantly different from everyone else. You might play guitar or like punk music. You might wear a biker jacket even though you don't own a bike. You might have Japanese stylings within your house, or you might have a fascination with sort of black and white movies from the 50s. Right? These things, when added together, do not make you worthwhile as an individual. All they do is sort of distract you from your lack of identity and against the world at large. That's all they do. I mean, look, when you meet someone and you go, oh, what do you do? And they tell you, right? And then you get onto stuff you like. How irrelevant is that? Like if their favourite actor is Brad Pitt, and you happen to like George Clooney more, what are you going to disagree and never speak over this again? It's just an irrelevance, right? But in some way it informs you of your identity. Forms of us have our identities, and these very kind of materialistic approach to forming your identity, where your identity could be formed by being a member of a tribe, right? I mean, most people alive, right, in Western society have, you know, between 3 and 4 names. That typically is the thing, right? You have, you know, maybe 2 first names and 2 surnames, or, you know, 2 first names and a surname, or 1 first name and 2 surnames. And there's rules like Mediterraneans and Latinos and such. I think they have their mother's surname first and then their father's surname second, or vice versa, but they have both, and they track the family tree that way. Sometimes you might have a couple of middle names in honor of your grandparents or something. The thing that used to make you an individual no longer possesses the scope in order to do it. And what do you see in these like homogenous communities is people adopting these more sort of crazy names. Names are much more varied than they used to be, right? I mean, you know, in the Catholic tradition, you just pick a saint and go with it, right? But there aren't enough saints anymore. There's too many people. You don't want to be kicking about with everyone called the same thing. So you form your identity based on a number of other things. The government helps you out a little bit. It goes, here's your ID number. You're like, oh, thanks very much. I feel totally special now. Right? Your individualism is kind of, it's not real. Right? In the last video, I spoke about how the perfectionist is something that's useful. Is useful to women because the perfectionist will strive hard. Well, at the same token, right, the individualist is also useful to women. But I think women suffer from this also. In terms of a man's usefulness to a woman, an individual will bring home all of the reward, right? That's how that works. Whereas a member of a group will bring home a share of the reward. And then essentially less per person. But when you consider that the probability of success is greater, then really you should be marching out as a group, as a group on the whole. I think perhaps the problem is that you essentially make promises to other people. Maybe for women the problem isn't the extra stuff that you're bringing home, but it's the it's the focus of attention. She's the most important person, right? So if one of your tribe members needs you, a short call, then you've got to make a choice between him and her. And maybe to women at some core level, it's worth the payoff of less reward and a less certain reward, right? Maybe it's worth that payoff. But for women too, they want distinguishing features about themselves. It seems to be almost at the core of feminism. They don't want to be this kind of like broodmare gloop of humanity. Maybe the internet is kind of partly responsible for this. Certainly things like the ease of Atlantic travel, high-speed trains and aeroplanes and cars and so on. It's made it possible for you to up sticks and move anywhere you like, which was rightly seen as great at the time, but no one really considered what it would do to the tribal infrastructure. A bloke can ditch his tribe and exile himself at any time with relative ease. And that's not the kind of security that you can sell. Yeah, tribes. So there you go. Have a think about that. I'm not entirely sure how you would encourage tribal development in inhumans in a society that hasn't got one. We're certainly restricted in terms of, in terms of sort of pushing tribal agendas, essentially. Like, you all get busted for preferential treatment of your friends if you're trying to employ them. So I don't really know what the answer is. I think maybe it's just to see what happens, right? I mean, after all, if tribes were all the same, what would be the point in having them? Anyway, I wish you a good day. Thanks for listening. Bye.